We will stand and fight!
I've noticed we've been sharing our culture with you all morning.
Fear doesn't exist in the dojo. No, hey, doesn't exist in the dojo. No, hey, defeat doesn't exist in the dojo. No, hey.
Oh my future. Oh my future. Oh my future. Oh my future. Oh my future.
You're going to take a baseball bat to a horseman, finish the job, because there's one rule of gang fighting. See, we are the original gang, and we're the most vicious in all of professional wrestling history. They send one of yours to the hospital, you send one of theirs to the morgue.
Conan, what is best in life? Crush your enemies, see them driven before you, and to hear the lamentation of their women. That is good. That is good.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are live!
Now, for the thousands in attendance and the millions watching around the world on HBO pay-per-view. Ladies and gentlemen, from Mandalay Bay, Las Vegas, let's get ready to rumble!
I am the best wrestler in the world. I've been the best ever since day one when I walked into this company, and I've been vilified and hated since that day because Paul Heyman saw something in me that nobody else wanted to admit. That's right, I'm a Paul Heyman guy.
Welcome to another edition of Thunderdome!
Finally, The Rock has come back!
This is home, JR! Right here!
Home. Oh!
Look at me! I have the power!
Oh, what's up? Is it great to be alive on a Tuesday afternoon or what? Yeah, it's LP. Someone, who's actually in comics, right? Maybe not to the extent of like a Brian Michael Bendis or a J. Scott Campbell, but I am in the industry. I am a 10-time published comic book writer. Actually, it's more than 10 times. My books can be found in comic book shops, those that remain anyway. You can buy them at Midtown Comics, Mile High, and all these online places, assuming they haven't shut down yet. And of course, you can buy them directly from me on eBay and my Kickstarter, which we actually shut down all physical tiers. I know there's a tier in my beer. Shut them all down yesterday at June 1st, but you can still pick up Nyobi. Get your Nyobi fix. Check out my work for the first time, maybe digitally for the next week or two. That will still be available to you on the Nyobi Outbreak number 5 Kickstarter. I bid you greetings and welcome, by the way. Greetings and welcome. Where's the button? Welcome to the end of the internet. Welcome to Beyond the Walls of Ice. And welcome to the Canadas of your soul.
Welcome to another edition of Thunderdome!
You know what I hate the most? I hate armchair quarterbacks the most. I hate marketing gurus the second most. I hate people who come into this spot and try and tell guys like me that it's raining out when they're trying to piss in my face. I hate that with a passion. People that are coming around trying to tell me, someone who's actually been doing this for 12 years, that the comic book industry isn't dying a slow and painful death. They're trying to tell me that this isn't happening. When I've seen sales numbers, when I've seen stores close, when I've watched everyone's Kickstarters take a big dip since COVID, okay? Where we hear all the layoffs that are happening across the board between Marvel and all the way down. When the fall of Diamond happened. And you're trying to tell me that comic books aren't dying. You need to reevaluate yourself and you need a new education because school's in session. You understand? Yes, comic books are absolutely dying. Is it death overnight? No. But is it death by like 1,000 stabs? Yeah, it sort of is. It's like a frog in boiling water, right? You don't realize that you're boiling. You don't realize that that skin is being burnt off, but it most absolutely is, And I hate to say it because I'm a guy who makes and writes comic books. As I said, I've been doing this now for over a decade, but I've seen it all. And I not only make my comic books, but I pay attention to all the beats on the street, if you will. I watch all the YouTubers. I read all the articles. I listen, more importantly, to what my publisher says about the state of the industry. Maybe you should actually do that. Start talking to some publishers and tell them, hey, no, your crumbling business isn't dying. Comic books are okay. They're not. And they haven't been for a while. And there's several reasons for that. And we've talked about this ad nauseum on this channel. Nauseum, right? But every now and then you're going to get some dude, some dude's going to sit in his chair with his arms on his chest, right? On his belly. And he's going to fold them up and he's going to talk like he's an expert. Like he's an expert. And it's just not the way it's done. We're going to watch this guy. I like to peruse comic book YouTube for things just like this. Just like this, because there are people who want it to be alive so badly that they refuse to see the signs that are right in front of them. Right? It's like the person who's trying to find a particular location but refuses to listen to directions refuses to look at a map, refuses to use the GPS because they think they're so confident that they know the way, we're going to deal with one of those. We're going to bring school to him. The bells are going to ring. School's definitely in session. And I come at it from a person who's actually selling these things. And I don't mean like I'm flipping comics. I mean, I make and produce comic books in a market that really can't support it. And the only reason why we've been able to get by is because I've been around so long. So Nyobi has established itself a very small but core buyer base that helps keep the comic alive. Outside of that, the comic would be dead, like many other comic books would be dead. Again, thus coming back to the sentiment of comics aren't dying. What world do you live in, man? These guys are going to try and tell me that webtoons and manga are comics. And I think that's the thing that we need to define the most, is what is a comic book. Some people are going to give it such a broad stroke and call it anything with an illustration that tells a story is a comic book. Well, by that logic, caveman paintings and Egyptian hieroglyphs are all comic books. No, that's not what we mean, and you fucking know this, right? Stop playing semantics. Stop trying to be, so broad. Right? Let's get technical. To me, a comic book is a 24-page American floppy. We're not talking webtoons. We're not talking 200-page mangas. We're not talking about that 500-page hardcover you got on your shelf that you're never going to read. We're talking about Wednesday Warriors. We're talking about Marvel and DC and Image. We're talking about small publishers that make a standard size comic book at $4.99. And that's a big problem, is the price. That's one of them. And trying to get people to come in every Wednesday to the local comic book shop like it's the 1990s. Yeah, you're right. No, I'm right. You're wrong. Those days are done. They're dying. They're dying, man. It just is. We are going to watch a video. This is a Nyobi Comics special EFAP presentation. And you're going to see more of these, where we have to right the ship and correct some people that are just on the wrong path of thought. This is what we do here. We share our knowledge so that people don't make dumb and misinformed decisions, if you will, or come out with the wrong tape. Because if Brian LCS is the only voice that you listen to, you're in trouble, right? The whole idea about me having something to say about this gives a different perspective, right? Hopefully it opens the mind a little bit. Hopefully it opens the eyes a little bit. Hopefully it wakes people up. So let's go, right? Just like the song says, let's get ready to fly. Let's get ready to go. Without further ado. Doo-doo? Brian loves collecting Spidey. Oh boy.
Everyone needs to slow down and catch their breath.
Whoa.
Over the last
well, yeah. I think that might be a thing you might want to do.
Few weeks in the comic book community here on YouTube, everybody's been doing their best Chicken Little impression.
Run! Comics are dying. And I remember thinking, what does that even mean?
All right, so we have some more bad news in the comic book industry.
Look, and this is bad news. Now, what you think about Clownfish TV or not, he happens to report on a lot of the Bleeding Cool news, right? He's just reading the news. It's not like he's coming up with this stuff himself. Mad Cave lays off editors and marketers, and president tells us why. Just recently, we also had Marvel Comics, right? Disney do the chop. Longtime editors of Marvel Comics have been replaced by people who run the animation side of things, right? A lot of companies are downsizing. Dark Horse Comics, I think, has all of its employees wanting to unionize, which is something similar that happened to Image Comics not that long ago. Why? Because the margins are getting smaller. The money isn't as abundant as it once was. So all these cuts are happening, and they're going to continue to happen. And you're telling me that comic books are alive and well. They're not.
I know you guys love it when there's bad news in the comic book industry.
It seems like from the moment I started reading comics, I had been told that comics were dying.
People think comic books are dying. Comic books as a medium are on the decline. Well, let's break it down. Let's talk about it. Here are some of the reasons why people think comic books are dying. We've seen some declining superhero sales.
Some? How about a lot? Outside of Absolute Batman, tell me, what's the big selling comic book? You know, you're wearing an Amazing Spider-Man shirt. Look, I remember when Amazing Spider-Man was the pinnacle. It was between that and Uncanny X-Men, right? Maybe Batman. But the pinnacle of sales for comic books. I don't even know if I ever see Spider-Man in the top 20 anymore, dude, to be honest with you, right?
But wait, I thought Absolute DC was going to save comic books. That was the narrative just a few weeks ago. We hear about stores. LCS is closing.
And they are. You know, for every one that probably pops up, 20 more are probably shutting down, bro. I can't tell you how many people I've talked to. I'm like, oh, yeah, you know, you can get Nyobi at your LCS now. And they're like, but I don't have an LCS. My town hasn't had an LCS in 5 years. The closest LCS to me is, you know, is a 5-hour drive. A lot of people now are, you know, who want their Wednesday comics. I know one YouTuber in particular, he has to order them every week, dude. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, and that's true. We have seen some LCSs close. But, I mean, if you look across retail in general.
We're not talking about retail in general. Why are you giving it a broad stroke? We're talking about, at this particular point in time, comic book shops.
There are a number of areas that are closing. Shops.
Yeah, because the economy sucks.
Beyond comic books, retail stores are closing. But then there are some other areas in retail, discount chains.
Okay, but we're not talking about discount chains. We don't sell comic books in discount chains, do we? No, we sell comic books at the comic book shop.
That are opening up, that are increasing.
So how does that help comic books, bud? That I can go buy a T-shirt poorly made in China for $5.99. How does that help comic books?
It really depends on who you ask.
Well, right now we're asking you.
They state aging readership.
The readership is aging. If you go ahead and you take a look at whoever's making comic book content right now, Brian, they're people of our age, right? And I don't know how old you are, but I'm going to guess just by appearance alone, you're in your 50s, right? I am a young 51-year-old, okay? I got a lot of youth and spirit still left in me, so I don't even consider myself to be that of my age. You know, I look at people my age and think they're old. But with that being said, it is the Gen Xers who are still holding on to comic books. The millennials and the Gen Z, yeah, some of them dabble, but you're going to talk about it here in a minute. You're going to bring up the word manga. And manga's not comic books, and I know it translates to Japanese comic books in a literal sense. But again, I have given the definition of a comic book when we started this video. When we talk about the death of comic books, we're not talking about, you know, sequential storytelling. We are talking about the American 24-page floppy at $4.99 and the shops that carry them. Okay, and the future of that format in particular. So I want you to stay on topic, please.
I'm probably one of those, right? I'm not getting any younger. But if you actually look at the data about...
Which you never show. If you're going to bring up the word data, sir, my name is Data, not data. You better show us some data.
30% or more of U.S. comic readers are age 18 to 24.
And where are you getting those statistics? You got to cite your sources, my friend.
We've seen buyers, about 28% are between 25 and 34.
Where's that proof?
And then that doesn't even capture any of the digital reading that is happening with younger audiences.
Which most of them do. let me be very clear when it comes to digital, because I hated digital for the longest time, and I've come now to embrace it, right? And I can show you the numbers with Nyobi in particular, because that's kind of what I do. If you go to the Nyobi Outbreak Kickstarter and you take a look at the amount of people that backed us digitally, it's almost half. It's not quite half, but it's very close to half. It's like 44, 45% of all my backers, the 300 backers that came in, right? It's almost 150 of them, maybe a little bit more now. I have to go back and recount them, have backed me on a digital tier. That's how they want to read their comic books, right? And that's kind of sucks for the physical format. At the same time, this is how the younger generation does read, Brian, right? They read digitally. They were born with phones in their hands, bro. You understand? They go to webtoons. I was at a convention just a couple of weeks ago, the MCE, okay? And I had a guy come up. He's like, yeah, kind of like comic books. And he was flipping through my box. But he says, I just rather read them on my phone. And I said, well, what do you mean? He's like, well, I read them on webtoons and stuff. And he says, I even read Spider-Man there. I mean, you read Spider-Man on webtoons? And he's like, yeah. And he pulls it up, and there's a whole bunch of Spider-Man comics right there on webtoons. So either he's reading for free or he's paying a very low subscription rate, and he's getting a shitload of content, right? I don't know how anyone's making any money off of that, like the creators themselves. But the fact remains is that they rather read for free or pay a very low subscription rate as opposed to buying comics at $4.99 plus tax and storing them in a box. You know how many people tell me that they don't want to store comic books in long boxes because they look so ugly around the house? They look so dated. Like, and I'm kind of there with them, right? Like, I'm on a crusade myself to sort of downsize my collection, because Brian did say one thing that's definitely true, is that we're not getting any younger, right? And I'm surrounded myself, in the later half of my life with these 18 long boxes of comics and going, why in the fuck did I accumulate so much of this shit that's going to be so hard to sell? It's just true, man. So I think part of the death of comic books is also that people are starting to realize, just like I am, that we don't really need all this, right? That was fun to accumulate when we were younger, when we thought we had all the time in the world, and we had all these big ambitions of getting rich, and we'll sell our young blood ones off for thousands of dollars, and our death as Superman will carry us into the afterlife. But we all come to realize that just isn't so, and I can't tell you how many, long-term collectors I've spoken to trading in their comic books and taking trade paperbacks or the hardcovers as a replacement because they just want to read the stories. The fact that having a whole run of X-Men doesn't mean anything to them if only a handful of them are key issues and worth any money. Now you're just talking about overpriced pieces of paper. And for stories, they rather just read the arcs that they're interested in. It just is, dude.
Another item is endless relaunches and reboots.
So the thing about the relaunches and reboots is that it's a desperate ploy, honestly, to try and get younger readers, new readers, if that, into comic books, right? How many people are going to want to start on a Batman series where it's Batman issue 778? It's like, I can't tell you how many people I see on Twitter, younger people who want to read comic books, are getting interested in comic books because of Marvel Rivals, right? So characters like Luna Snow and Magic and things like that are gaining a lot of popularity in the video game realm. And so they know that these characters come from comics, but they have no idea where to start. And it's kind of hard to even tell them where to start. Where do you tell how do you tell someone start with X-Men #1 from back in 1960? Right? The thing about manga is manga has really done a good job of putting a lot of things in a condensed volume, but giving those volumes clear numbering. Volume 1, Volume 2, where do I start with One Piece? You start with Volume 1. There is no Volume 1 of Batman anymore or Volume 1 of X-Men. No, there's like the Dark Phoenix Saga or Kraven's The Last Hunt or Batman the Cult, There's story arcs that you can definitely point people towards. And then they have to hope to find the single issues or try and track down a trade or see if that's in some sort of collected format. And the other problem is, Brian, is the availability of comics, right? So for me to recommend someone, say Magic, from the X-Men, one of my favorite all-time characters, either I have to direct them to the LCS or I got to direct them online, because Barnes and Nobles and Target and Walmart and all this stuff, they don't sell what's required to get these people into comic books, right? Every now and then you'll see something Marvel related, but it's not what we're talking about at all. So let's continue on.
This is true. It's something that I don't enjoy. I think it's troublesome for long-term readers, long-term collectors, because you don't have that.
It's not about you anymore, man. Right? The WWE doesn't make content for the Attitude Era fans. You understand? Marvel and DC are making content in the hopes that they are bringing up the next generation. They're already kind of dead, dude. I'm sorry to tell you.
Legacy numbering. I think that is potentially an issue for, like I said,
because if they weren't dying, we wouldn't be having this conversation. If comic books were on the rise, these conversations wouldn't be happening at all. We'd be talking about, oh my God, the latest Spider-Man just topped the fucking numbers from last month. Those are conversations we're not having.
Like me, but I think of it as a great jumping in point for young readers. We mentioned Absolute, DC. That recently has spiked sales and brought.
Yeah, inflated. What do you know? Well, I write comic books. I've been published 12 times. I've been in preview magazines. I've worked with Legends. I work with Antarctic Press as a publisher, so I've seen sales numbers. I actually have been there and done that. What do you know?
In new readers, at least from what I've heard from my LCS and others in the business. One of the other items that people say why comic books are dying is that movie fans are not buying comics, right? They're not.
They're not. I've talked to so many people. It's like, they're wearing a Spider-Man shirt right at a convention. And I'm like, oh, you like Spider-Man? What's your favorite story arc? Or, what series are you currently reading? Or, and they're like, oh, no, I just like the show. Or I just like the movie. And they fucking mosey on.
Not converting the people that are going to see all the movies or watching the shows on streaming services into readers. I don't know if there's any real data to back that up. I think there are a percentage that
comics. Well, are you talking about the standard 24-page floppy comic? Because that's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about manga. I'm not talking about Biggie Shack. Biggie Shack knows how to smoke a ton of cigarettes and drop pizza all over his shirt. Let's just get it clear.
That come over, and then there are people that are just movie watchers and not really comic book readers. They enjoy the characters, but they won't ever convert over into
like, unless if you make a comic book, produce a comic book, work with the publisher, I don't consider anyone's opinion valid on this subject, because we're talking about the sales of comic books. Okay, we're talking about numbers, we're talking about shops, we're talking about profit. We're not talking about some dude who thinks he knows every first appearance. That could mean shit to me, to be honest with you.
To comic book, readers, collectors. I think the movie studios and the publishers could do better tie-ins there. Giving away comic books maybe at a premiere. We've got 2 big movies opening this summer. Supergirl.
Yeah, and Supergirl has promoted the comic book. If you ever look at the Supergirl trailer, the first one, right at the very end of the trailer, what did they show you? They show you, and this story is based off of, and they put the cover right there of Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow, front and center. Well, you know what, Biggie Bum? Christopher Jackson, go ahead, time him out for 24 hours. That's what he gets.
Spider-Man Brand New Day.
You go ahead and do that.
Why not give out an ash can or a comic book during those premieres at the movie theater, and maybe you'll bring some new readers in. That's just a thought on my end. But so those are some.
And here's what I would say, Biggie's Bum. And I'm sure if I go look up your channel, you're going to have 0 subscribers and no content because you're a troll. We don't do trolls around here. I see someone like you. You're just here to give a hard time. You're not actually here to give any real insight into the conversation. We just kick you out, pal. Bye-bye.
Some of the reasons why people say comic books are dying, but I think let's talk about what's actually happening. Manga, right? Manga is taking hold of young readers, and this has nothing to do with Jake Paul, right?
That's Logan Paul, you fucking nitwit. Jesus Christ. If you're gonna talk about someone, at least learn their fucking name. You know what I mean? Learn their name, dude. That's Logan Paul. And he absolutely does have an influence. He has a huge influence, especially amongst young people. Not only is Logan Paul a large media star, he's also large now in the WWE, which has huge crossover with comic books, bro. Huge.
Right? Manga has been around for a long time. My kids, who are now young adults, had Pokemon manga and anime manga when they were, teenagers.
And that's still what sells today. Having, again, just recently been at a convention, I can tell you that if they were under the age of 30, most of them weren't looking at the comic book tables. What were they carrying around? Pokemon cards, binders of cards. That's what they were carrying. Some of them with some Hot Wheels, some of them with some Funko Pops. And that's about it. That's what they're into.
And this is, 10 years ago. So that has been around. And right, when you think about manga and comic books, at a basic level, they are both sequential art storytelling.
Right, but that's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is the survivability of a $4.99 comic book at 24 pages in the format that it is and in which the way it's sold. Manga's a completely different beast, bro. Manga's kicking our ass. Eventually, if people really want to survive in this space, and I've thought about this, is making Nyobi a manga.
It's a same medium telling a story with art, right? Although there's different format. Manga is different. The format that we read, left to right to left, is different. Obviously, there's a lot of culture impact, different, right? Originating in the Asian culture. There's obviously reading style and publishing systems that are different between comic books and manga. But I think if people are still reading and enjoying artwork in whether it's a comic book format or a manga format, it's a win-win for the industry.
No, it's not. How is manga kicking our asses a win-win for the independent comic book publisher when they're trying to reach a younger audience and they don't even want to look at what we do? How is it a win-win for Marvel and DC when they have to rely on 120 different variant covers, store exclusives, and blind bags in order to sell a comic book that no one's going to read? Come on, dude. Get with it.
I think our younger audience is reading webtoons, right? We see that skews to a younger audience, and they're reading them on their phones, right? This is really
that's correct, and that's what's part of killing the industry is that they're not buying. They're reading for free for the most part, if they're reading at all.
This is not a good format to read comic books on. If anything, I'll read it on a tablet or a desktop computer where I can have a bigger display on my monitor. But for me, this isn't great for comic books. But for webtoons, this is a perfect device. And I think certainly didn't pull any data on how many young teenagers have phones, but
almost all of them. Almost all of them.
But we know it's a large segment of the population, right? Think about Kickstarter, right?
Oh, this should be good. What the fuck do you know about Kickstarter? I've been doing Kickstarter since 2014. This should be good.
Kickstarter books, comic books, this is not your main, this is not Marvel or DC. This is independent books. And I pulled some data from Kickstarter. Comic projects are successful 68% of the time.
Yeah, and I want to see that data. Show me the screenshot of where you pulled that from. Okay, because the data seems to change depending on who I hear it from. But let's assume that you're correct for a second, and I'm not even sure that you are. 68% of all comic books fun. Yeah, yeah. Do you consider a poorly drawn comic book with a funding goal at $500 with 17 backers a success? Because those are part of the equation that you are factoring in when it comes to this 68% that we're talking about here. We're talking about just like any old thing flying past the radar, and we're talking about the lowest funding goals possible with comic books that half of them probably don't even get made because they fund it so low, they don't have the money to actually produce and ship them out.
On Kickstarter, one of the highest success rates on the platform for any of the project types.
That's because the bar of entry for comic book Kickstarter is pretty low compared to backing a video game or an invention or board game or whatever else you're going to see on Kickstarter. A lot of those are essentially higher price items, right?
And they say, and this comes from Kickstarter, that comic book projects are not risky compared to the other categories.
It's not very often I get to laugh out loud, but let me educate you, my friend. The reason why that comic books aren't doing as well on crowdfunding, you may think they're on fire, but I can tell you they're not. They were on fire in 2020. And let me walk you through a story here, okay? The story is this, that a lot of people got excited during COVID, right before COVID, and during COVID, about making and creating comic books. And so many of them have walked into this space and attempted to make a comic book, funded a comic book, maybe even successfully. Maybe they're even part of that 68% that you just brought up, and failed to deliver. You know how many people I've talked to that have gotten burned on the crowdfunding scene saying, yeah, I backed this comic book and it was 3 years late, or I backed this comic book and the creator just up and took my money, or I backed this comic book and there hasn't been an update on the campaign in over a year. I can show you, hundreds of campaigns that have failed to deliver with angry customers all and up and down the comment board. We've gone over them on this channel, again, ad nauseum. Clearly, you don't pay attention to the scene.
And their total comic sales last year was roughly 300, or the campaigns on Kickstarter were roughly $320 million.
Yeah. Well, guess what? Sometimes you'll have a Keanu Reeves that will show up and do millions of dollars, for a Boom Studio comic called Berserker. You'll have G.I. Joe that will come out with their hardcover omnibuses and Transformer collections and count into that equation, okay? That number you're giving is not reflective of the small independent comic book creator. It just isn't.
And tens of thousands of funded comic book projects every year. 22,000 last year, 22,000 comic book projects successfully funded on Kickstarter last year.
Yeah, and probably 40% of them, I'm just shooting out of my ass here, probably never got delivered. Rob Liefeld's Brigade, over 8 years late. Ethan Van Sciver, Cyberfrog, 5 years late.
So we are seeing the growth of independent comics, right?
Wrong. We saw the growth of independent comic books when it was actually really exciting back in 2014 when Lady Death took the Kickstarter and really inspired a lot of people saying, hey, maybe I can do this. I know it inspired me to do it, right? I started my first Kickstarter in 2014. And that was really the golden age of modern indie comic books coming up through the crowdfunding platforms. It was right before COVID. Everyone was excited. Everyone was making comic books. There was so much enthusiasm and so much camaraderie. There was just so much back and forth that everyone was chiming in with each other, and everyone was making content, and everyone was running YouTube channels, promoting Kickstarters, and now you hardly see any of that. I'm one of the few people left that still do it.
And we hear about it too. I think independent stories. You think of, the independent publishers. It's tough to say Image is an indie publisher, but they're certainly not. I would consider them one of the big publishers. But
so that's a half and half. Yes, Image is probably considered the big three, but all the projects that are brought to them are still creator-owned projects. They just happen to get lucky enough that Image has accepted them.
When you think about some of the smaller indie publishers, their stories are in some cases better. And I think the reason why is that their biggest advantage is there's less historical red tape.
Well, I mean, the reason why some of those stories might be better is because Marvel and DC have a certain way that they want their characters and stories to be portrayed, right? Portrayed, not betrayed. And a lot of times as a writer, if you're working with those companies, you're subject to their guidelines on how they want those stories to be implemented. So you may have a big, great idea, but if it doesn't fit in with that corporate vision for Spider-Man, let's say, then you're going to have to readjust your story. Where if you are an independent comic book creator submitting an Image, it's just like Todd McFarlane says, we don't have a say in what you produce. We don't have a say in what you write. You're the boss. If we like it and we publish it, that's the end. There is no sort of overlords telling you what to do. You screwed over Chris? How so? How so? Chris screwed over me.
Right? When you think about Spider-Man, he's 60 plus years old in comic books. Batman, 80 years old.
Just go ahead and time him out too.
Superman, over 90 years old in comic books. And so you have this historical red tape that carries and follows these characters. And so I think it limits what some of the writers and the editors at Marvel and DC do with these characters. But the indie stories can be, they can take chances. And typically, an indie book may not be an ongoing. It's going to be maybe a 4-issue, 6-issue, 10, 12-issue storyline.
Well, that's what Marvel is right now, right? Hardly any Marvel comic book being produced is getting past issue 10. Couple exceptions, Spider-Man, the X-Men, but that's it. You know what I mean? Most of these series, you have Dan Slott going on YouTube begging people to please buy Spectacular Spider-Man past issue 5 or else they don't get made,
And so they can take bigger chances, bigger swings in those stories than they can with some of these mainstream characters that have been around for years, right? And I think the last factor is creator-owned success stories, right? We recently saw Dorked, Brett Beans. He owns it, although it's published through Image. Exquisite Corpses, James Tinian, creator-owned, right? I think it has sold in total well over 700,000 copies of that book, and that is a creator-owned. And so we're seeing the comic book industry evolve, right? It's this kind of identity shift, right? It's not about just Marvel and DC publishing superhero floppy stories every month, right?
But that's what we're talking about, though. That's when we say comic books are dying. That scenario that you just brought up, Marvel and DC publishing superhero comic books monthly, is what we're talking about. Is that dying, Brian? That's what I want you to answer.
We're seeing this shift, right? Traditional comic book shops, even your regular LCS, they're kind of changing, right? They don't only sell comics.
Well, no, most comic book shops never did, right? Unless if you're really talking about the grungy hole-in-the-wall comic book shop, for as long as I can remember, comic book shops sold everything kind of geeky, from action figures to magic cards. I mean, I was buying magic cards at my LCS way in the early 2000s, dude. Come on, man.
A lot of them need to stay afloat in their business, need to kind of change their business model. They are selling toys. They are selling cards. They may be getting into physical media. video games, VHS, DVDs, Blu-rays, all of the different
junk. But I got you.
Movie and streaming service media, right? I think that's what we're seeing in traditional LCSs are kind of branching out to help keep their stores afloat, because maybe they cannot only survive on just selling comics alone.
So if they can't survive on selling comics alone, how can you tell me that comic books aren't dying? Question mark.
And I think the other thing too is that there are different ways other than floppy comic books to get access to comic book material.
Okay, but again, we're talking about the death of the floppy comic book. In particular, when you say comic book, right, everyone has a mental image in their mind. And it's not a manga. It's a Spider-Man or an X-Men or a Batman comic book, in that 10 point, by 2.5 by 6.75 dimension with 24 pages. Sold on a weekly basis at a comic book shop. Is that dying? That's what I want to know from you.
Right, you have all of the comic book apps, right? Marvel has one, DC has one. There, you can get trade paperbacks, you can get omnibus.
Right, not 24-page floppies, right?
So it's not only buying the monthly floppies. You have access through your local library, which typically, is going to be,
which gives this shit away for free. Now it helps with some exposure, sure. But if kids are used to going to the library to get their comic book fix, that means they're not going to the comic book shop to buy the books now, are they? Thus helping put another nail in the coffin of the death of comics.
Free, as long as you're a resident, you can get access to the library, which has a pretty big offering of comic book material to read for free. And so I think we're just seeing this shift. And so I don't think people understand that. It's not that the medium is dying. It's kind of evolving and changing. Where will the comic book industry go in the future? I think we're starting to see it now. We're seeing the transition from older readers like me who collected books in the convenience store, picked them up in the convenience store, gas stations, grocery stores.
You see, and that scenario is how we actually bring comic books back, right? There is a push for physical media. You brought it up. There are kids out. I've seen kids who collect cassette tapes. Blows my mind that you would want a cassette tape in this day and age, right? I would never, ever in my life buy probably another DVD, Blu-ray, cassette tape again, right? CD, for music or movies, because I can access all that online. Why am I going to have a pile of DVDs I'm only ever going to watch once or twice in this house, right? Kids would look at comic books in such the same manner, We're in an internet society where we're used to getting a lot of this stuff for free, whether it's legitimate or sailing the seven seas. Piracy is another big thing of the death of comic books, bro, that you have to understand, right? A lot of people do read on their devices and they want to read for free and they don't want to pay $4.99 a book, but they're curious to what's going on, so they pirate the books. You don't ever bring that up now, do you?
Now where we have these specialty shops, I think we're seeing that transition from those old fans or old readers, collectors, to newer, younger fans. And I think what we'll see is that there's going to be less physical collecting, right? That people are not going to buy as many floppies in the future. Maybe they go to trade or digital.
Okay, but without the floppies, you have no trade, right? So all a trade paperback is a collection of floppies that have been accumulated over, say, 5 or 6 months, right? Every half year, they'll put out the first 5 issues into a trade in the hopes to make some extra money. But if those issues aren't selling, those series get canceled, then where's your future trades going to come from, dude?
I think digital is going to really be what we see in the future, because the fact that, like I said, there are so many young people with phones.
Yes, and I've learned to embrace digital again. We charge actually the same price, mostly for a digital product than we're starting to with our physicals, right? If you go ahead and buy a game on the PlayStation Plus, one would think, oh, it's digital, it should be cheaper, right? No, Nope, that would be a wrong assumption. It's the same price as buying a physical copy. You know what I mean? Digitals are starting to be sold at that same way.
Old people, I mean, there are so many people with phones in general, right? And so I think you're going to continue to see the rise in consumption of comic book content on digital formats.
Yeah, but if we're not getting paid, who's going to make that content, right? Who's gonna spend hours and hours and hours producing comic books for digital consumption and make pennies on the dollar? That's sort of the problem with digital right now, is if you're like on a Webtoons or a Global Comics, like some sort of digital site with your book, they do monthly subscription fees, and then you get a small piece of that based on how many people are reading your book, which turns out to be, like, one creator told me after having his book up for several months, he made 79 cents. Are you fucking kidding me?
You know, whether that's phone, tablets, desktops, I think we're just going to continue to see that growth. So I don't think the comic book medium is dying. I think it's just evolving, but I'd love to hear what you think.
I just told you.
Let me know. Let me know down in the comments what you think of this topic. Are we just seeing the shift and is evolution of physical maybe more to more digital, and just different ways to consume the same types of content, but just not in your physical floppy book.
Right, but that's what's dying right there. What he's got in his hand, that's what's dying. That's what I'm talking about. That's the hill that I'm on, right? Because that's what I make, and that's what I'm concerned about. You know what I mean? I don't care that there's Webtoons. That's not what I make. I don't care, digitally so much, right? Because even when we do our campaigns, you know where we make our money from? Physical sales. Yes, we make money from digital, but we make far more from a physical sale, because oftentimes we're selling things as lots, or we're selling variants, okay? A foil cover or some sort of tchotchke or gimmick to go along with it, signatures, what have you. It's kind of hard to sign a digital project. How are you going to bring a digital comic book to a convention and have that signed, Brian? You know what I mean? And again, I told you, try making a comic book and putting it up on Global Comics and see how much money you make. Try making a comic book and put it up on Webtoons and see how much money you make. No, there's a problem right now, and the problem is several things. Availability. Okay, that's check one. Where can we actually buy comic books? Well, the number one answer is the LCS or online. There is no other real physical locations where people can go buy floppies. That needs to change. Issue number 2, price. These comic books cost too damn much, especially in a day and age where people can find a way to read for free. Okay. Number 3, the content isn't as good as it used to be. It's just a fact, right? I have, much like you, Brian, probably, thousands of comic books that span back decades, and I find myself going back and rereading the older stuff because it's just simply better. It's just simply better, So, and then number 4 is manga. Manga is what the way that kids buy manga is the way we want them buying comic books, and it's just not happening. Few exceptions. I have seen kids come in and buy comic books, but a lot of them are buying for different reasons, because they're used to buying Pokemon cards and sending them into PSA. Now they understand that comic books is also another collectible that they can buy and grade. And so some of them are buying because of that reason, right? Very, very few people underneath the age of 25 have I spoken to that can actually walk me through a comic book arc of a storyline that they've read. Very, very few. So while comic books aren't dead, they are certainly dying, right? Just much like the 8-track died, Brian. Okay. It's sort of that same format. Eventually a format just overstays its welcome. Eventually a format becomes dated. And I think that's where we are. Just old fuckers like me won't let it go. That's all. We just won't let it go, right? That's why I continue to make floppies, because that's what I've been sort of built and bred to do. But do I understand that we're in trouble? Yeah, I understand it. I understand it quite well because I see it in the numbers. So this is it, man. That's what I gotta say. Let me know what you gotta say, as a couple of people did in the chat. It's no good to come into my live chat and try to attack or bully me. It's not gonna work. I'm just gonna time you out. I'm just gonna send you on your way. But if you want to sound off in the comments section, do that, because that will actually give me more views and help the algorithm. Bad or good, it doesn't matter, man. It is what it is, man. So give me something to chew on. Leave your comments down in the comments section below, and we will see what happens in the future with the comic book industry. But you can't tell me that comic books aren't dying when I'm seeing massive layoffs, comic book shops closing, YouTubers coming up and asking why comic books are dying. If they were doing so well, again, we wouldn't be having this conversation. We just wouldn't, man. We'd be talking about the success of comics. We'd be bragging about how Spider-Man just sold 2 million copies. It's not happening. It's just not happening, man. I was doing $30,000 campaigns. Not anymore. Now we're doing half that amount. And there's reasons for it.